Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and happy holidays, and welcome back to the Last Edit podcast, a podcast about film starring yours truly, Silver Hawkins, and the great.
Citizen Sleeve, happy Christmas, everybody.
Today, after the last two sessions, today we are not going to talk about a holiday film. Actually, we are going to talk about one of my favorite animated films and favorite films in general. A film that really has occupies a soft spot in my heart, and that is Les Triplettes de Belleville by Sylvain Chomet from 2003. It's an animated film about an old Portuguese woman called Madame Souza and her nephew, Champion, who has been orphaned at an early age. And Souza then starts to sort of search for something that engages the little morose, depressed boy. And at first she buys him a puppy, and then she sees him respond to watching a pianist on the television. She tries to sort of get him involved in music, but that doesn't really work. And then she notices that he's cut out from the newspaper. He's cut out an article about the Tour de France, and she finds underneath his bed, she finds sort of a scrapbook full of newspaper clippings and so forth of various bicycle races and bicyclists. And on the wall over his bed, Champion's bed, we see a photograph of his late parents with his father on his bicycle alongside his mother. And we realize that there's sort of a connection there, that the cycle racing is sort of a way for Champion to sort of connect with his parents who are no longer there. And so she buys him a little three-wheel bicycle, and he's, for the first and really only time in the entire film, he's utterly delighted, and he drives it around in circles. And eventually, Champion grows up to become a professional bicycle racer. He's unfortunately kidnapped by the French mafia, and then Madame Souza has to embark upon a quest to rescue him. And that's basically the main plot of the film. And it gets a little weird from there. Well, it really gets weird from the start. So let's just jump into it from the start. What did you think of it?
First of all, the animation I think we have to talk about because it's quite standout. It's a combination of almost old school Disney, old school French animation, even stuff like Asterix and Obelix. It's got touches of that, but also combined with 3D rendered models, like the
Yeah,
small Eiffel Tower, and the way those combine is really difficult to get right. But that whimsical, elongated art style really works well with those kind of 360 moments with the CGI.
yeah,
So that's beautiful. Uh, I really like the way that some of the animation ever so slightly alters according to the era that the film is in. So it just changes that little bit. So we open with a far more bold, stylistic style initially when we first see the sisters, or sorry, the triplets dancing. Yeah, and the
yeah,
way that the sisters have got this undercurrent throughout the film, we start with them, and it's a very oddly, it's an interestingly paced film because we have that really bombastic opening.
yeah. The
The
singy, wacky
singing,
stuff.
the dancing, the big routine they go through, and we get to know the initial kind of alias sisters. I'm going to say that every time, triplets, um, and and then we end up seeing Madame Sousa and Champion, and Champion is weird because he's treated like this racehorse. So
Yeah,
as you mentioned, first of all, we have him growing up, this little kid without his parents who's trying to latch on to something that is his grandma wants to try and make him fall in love with something again. And as you said, we start with these different things. He gets Bruno, who's this hilarious dog throughout the
yeah,
entire. Every time a train go past a window, Bruno is there,
yeah.
and Bruno
And
keeps having
utterly
this
loyal. Yeah,
yeah, and he keeps having this surreal black and white dream where he's heading towards a wall on top of a train as well.
yeah,
So you have this whole extra thing with this weird dog and how he exists in this world. Very, very funny, but very poignant to moments as well. But yeah, so he loves music. He can't quite latch onto that, and then he's bought this tricycle, and from that moment, we end up seeing his training
yeah,
as a cyclist. What's really funny is just mentioned he's basically treated like he doesn't speak. He's treated like a racehorse. His face is almost like a racehorse. And after, it's hilarious when she's behind him and he's going up
with
the
the
hill for
whistle?
the first
Yeah.
time. Yeah, with the whistle. All throughout the film, that damn whistle. And she's almost working harder than he is. Throughout the entire film, she's the hardest working person in the whole film.
Yeah.
Just shows you what, family member will do for someone else. But Champion, yeah, the first time he gets back and she gets out like a lawnmower thingy and a
Yeah.
brush and
the
like kitchen
vacuum cleaner.
utensils.
Yeah.
Yeah, and trying to iron out his back and his legs and all this stuff. But it seems as if at that moment when we're seeing all the training, it's a very slow pace, but also he doesn't seem engaged or enjoy. He's kind of going through the motions. He's going through what you would do to be a racehorse, I guess, to some extent. But there is that one moment when some music comes on the radio. He's on his the bike in the kitchen practicing, and he kind of drifts off again. So you get that sense that music is the thing he really wants to do, but the cycling lets him cling on to his parents, which is a nice thing that carries on throughout the film. And it's really funny that as he grows up and gets his own race bike, Madame Souza is actually following him whistling on the tricycle he had as a kid because she's that small.
Yeah.
Just hilarious. It really, really is. It really is.
Yeah. You mentioned the opening. The opening is clearly to me like the difference in animation style. The opening is an homage to like 20s 30s animation where you have like Felix the Cat, Steamboat Willie,
really thick lines everywhere.
that type and that sort of rubbery limbs type movement.
Betty Boop, that kind
really
of thing.
fluid. Yeah, Betty Boop as well. Popeye, even to an extent. Those old cartoons. It's really an homage to that. And then we see, when it cuts out, we see that Champion and Sousa have been watching it on the television, and it's one of the, I think, only two real spoken lines in the film where Sousa asks him, "Is the movie done yet?" Which will come back later to come full circle. But yeah, it's really, I mean, one of the things I adore about the animation is, especially the way the triplets are animated later on, is just the sort of rough edges of the pencil drawing that you can see, where it really sort of comes alive, and it really sort of brings about the magic of animation, which is making inanimate things like these drawings come to life just by flicking pages, really, and making the picture move, which is, I mean, that's the fundamental of film.
It's almost got a Tintin quality about it, hasn't it, the animation? And we mentioned before the podcast, early Disney, but Tintin as well, with, as you said, those rough edges, let the animation breathe. It doesn't need to be as clean as something like a Pixar, as something which is so commercially out there. And the way the animation flows, the buildings as well, we have to talk about. So their own home, there's this little montage where it goes from what was to what is, and this bridge is being built over them, and the house becomes crooked.
Tilted,
yeah, it's so brilliant the way that sequence is done. But throughout the film, especially when they go to Belleville, and we get the sweeping shots of the city and all the little details, the depth to what he's producing in each scene, it's absolutely fantastic. And
possibly the best.
It feels handcrafted.
Possibly the best scene in the film is the one leading up to their arrival in Belleville, where Champion gets kidnapped and put on a boat or a ship, and then starts crossing the Atlantic. And then Madame Sousa pursues him in a little paddle boat that she rents on the beach, and gets Bruno, the dog, to sort of pull it as they go along. And they cross the Atlantic through storms and everything to the score of one of Mozart's musical pieces. I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head.
I know the piece, but I don't know the name. Yeah.
But yeah, it's just a really sort of resounding scene that sort of leaves you a little breathless. Just the way the ship and the waves and everything is animated. It's just gorgeous.
Well, it's this massive storm happening, this huge rolling waves, and Madame Sousa in this tiny little boat. Bobbing up and down, trying to keep up with the ship. It's absurdity that's realistic, or feels it, because the characters seem so mad but completely grounded at times as well. I love the French mafia, the way they're designed. They all look the same. They all look like Agent Smiths, but with 1980s Margaret Thatcher-style body pads. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they all merge into one, as if you would think of a mafia like that. It's really actually a film about two particular things. It's a film about a family that's a bit broken, that's trying not to be and is trying to help itself, and the mafia family who don't like each other, don't care, and are trying to make money and profit off what Champion is, which is a nice dichotomy to have throughout the film. Oh, and we've got to talk about the sisters, the triplets. See, every damn time.
But they are sisters.
Yeah, yeah, I know, but
correct.
triplets is in the title. But they're so funny. They're such cool characters. And when Madame Souza, when Champion is kidnapped and Madame Souza doesn't know what to do anymore, she finds the sisters.
Yeah,
and she kind of loses herself a bit.
She's stranded in Belleville. No money, no place to go. Like, she doesn't know where Champion is. He's basically a needle in a haystack in the city. And she's lost. And she's just sitting underneath a bridge with Bruno. And she takes the bicycle wheel that she's carried with her all this time. And she's just
spinning
starts,
around,
she just starts playing music on it with drumsticks. And this brings out the triplets, who then starts accompanying her music with song. Which is a really lovely scene.
I love the bit where, so Madame Souza is now staying with the triplets.
Yeah.
And we should just say that by now the triplets are quite old women, but they still have that sense of song and dance, that
and
vaudeville.
they live in. It's pretty clear they've fallen upon rough times financially.
Yeah, oh yeah,
they
absolutely.
Live in a rather seedy part of town.
Yes. Yes,
Lot
more
of,
than seedy.
A lot of working girls outside in the hallway.
Yeah, exactly. But the little moments inside the flat. So Madame Souza at one point is about to go to sleep and she's reading a newspaper. And there's the bit before that with the fridge. So the triplets are in about the house. Madame Souza opens the fridge and the fridge is empty. And she's about to put something in because that's odd. And one of the triplets just closes the fridge and goes. And then she's about to go to sleep. The triplets are, and they're watching a film in their bedroom, and one is still outside. And she notices Madame Souza reading a newspaper. And she takes it off her, puts it down, and folds it up. I'm like, what's going on? And then a few scenes later, or the next scene, they're on stage, and one sister walks in, opens the fridge, twangs it, and starts playing the fridge like shelf.
She twangs the shelves, yeah.
Another one's got the newspaper. I forget what the third triplet has, but then the vacuum cleaner, that's it. And then Madame Souza comes in, and of course she's got the spinning bicycle wheel and the drums. And it's a fantastic, mad, absurd song. It's very, very unique in the way that it's brought together, and the little foreshadowing moments beforehand, which you're like, foreshadowing of what? And then there it is. It's absolutely lovely.
And of course we can't, if we're talking about the scene in the apartment, we can't not talk about how their dining habits, the sisters. The fact that they go down to the local coast, and then with a hand grenade, they toss it in there, blows up, rains frogs everywhere, and then they go and cook the frogs. And they eat frogs for breakfast, dinner, dessert. They eat it cooked, they eat it nearly raw, they eat it frozen like a popsicle. They eat it just about every possible way you can imagine.
And that is when you see that as well, you're like, come on now. You've seen every other form of frog, and there's frog on a stick, and you're like, okay.
Yeah, it's I mean, we have to talk I think also about the character design. Like every character in the film is sort of an outrageous caricature, with the possible exception of Madame Souza, who's sort of this really diminutive old lady with a clump foot, where she limps on this sort of plateau shoe on one of her legs.
That's incredibly funny as well. The fact she's so small, and that just to make a character even more odd.
Yeah, and I mean that goes to one of Shume's sort of philosophies. One of the main problems he has with like Disney animation is that pretty much every Disney protagonist outside of like Quasimodo is a beauty ideal. So all the Disney princesses, the Disney princes, and so forth, they're all sort of physically perfect. And that's way too boring. You have to do more with animation. You have to use animation to make characters memorable and special. And I think
it's not one note
that.
either.
No,
like you see, like the shots of the city. Because at first you think all the characters are going to be quite elongated, perhaps. But once you move past that and you get to Belleville proper, and you get those passing shots of the city, you see tiny folks, massive folks ridiculously overweight with tiny heads. Everything is so incredibly varied, very caricature-y, as you say. but purposefully to show diversity. Now, Champion's got calf muscles the size of,
Yeah, all the
small
bike riders
moons.
do. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
and
And
they're
that
all
weird kind of
like you mentioned, they're
angular
all like
design.
racehorses, basically.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And especially
exactly.
like the
Like
way
powerful
they
on the
start
legs.
wheezing is like they're neighing, basically.
That's a weird scene as well. When the mafia guys are all sat around the top of the that room with the two guys in charge, and the three cyclists are on like
The
cycles that are
contraption, yeah.
moving with the image of something in front of them as
The
if they're moving
projected
forward.
screen, yeah.
Yeah, it's so odd. You're like, what is going on here? And then they break free with Madame Sousa and the triplets help, and off
Yeah.
they go. It's so
Yeah.
weird. But again, it's got so much character. This film. It's
Yeah.
so many animated films I think become too generic and are devoid of really good character.
Yeah.
This is not. Every character has got their own unique style, their own unique set of physical tells because the film doesn't use dialogue virtually at all. The music as well works so beautifully in certain situations. We mentioned the different songs that we hear the triplets sing, but the music in between can be bombastic and soft. It suits the mood. I don't think I've got many criticisms of this. I really don't think. Maybe only the fact that Madame Sousa isn't very expressive in her face, perhaps. She's more of the po-faced, but we see that through other physical tells of hers rather
Yeah,
than her
like
face.
especially like the eyebrows and the constant adjustment of her glasses.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just sort of her main way of expressing herself. I think also there's a lot of symbolism to the film. I think really sort of the core message of it is sort of like there's a scene in the scene that you mentioned where you have all these mafia guys watching these three bicyclists, Champion and the two others who were kidnapped, uh, pedal on this contraption that's made so that they can sort of simulate a race and bet on who wins to varying odds. In that scene, one of the other cyclists passes out. He can't cycle. He can't pedal anymore.
Yeah.
And so the guy who's sort of been jotting down the odds on a big blackboard goes over, draws his pistol, and by the way, I found his character design to be by far the creepiest in the entire film.
Very much, yeah, yeah.
That toothy smile he has is just ugh. But yeah, he draws his pistol and he shoots him right there, and I think that's a commentary on what we do. And the sisters as well, the way they've sort of fallen into abject poverty despite their previous popularity, where they're sort of the true artists, and what the mafia is sort of trying to create is mechanical art.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that sort of the author of the contraption that Champion and the others pedal on is a little mousy mechanic. He's literally mousy. Like, he has mouse-like ears.
Yeah.
He has, like, whiskers. He squeaks all the time.
Hey,
And
Disney. Woo!
Yeah, and he's basically like Mickey Mouse. And Sousa gets his wallet, and she even finds, like, photographs of him there in Hollywood called Holly Food. And Disney World, like with Mickey Mouse. And yeah, that's a pretty not so subtle criticism of Disney.
He's not afraid to
from,
push the buttons a little bit on Disney. Obviously,
Yeah.
I mean, you told me prior to the podcast, a few days ago actually, that he wanted to be a Disney artist and he worked there for a bit, became disillusioned, and then he just wanted to go off and be more creative because Disney is a factory in essence. Of course, you can be creative in certain roles, but for animators, you're generally told what you are to do. Whereas he wanted that freedom to be able to breathe a bit and do a
And
more distinct style.
He worked at a Disney studio in Toronto, where they were working on a sequel to I forget which one. I think maybe it might have been a Lion King sequel or something. It was a sequel to one of their core
The straight to video
films.
ones usually, or straight to DVD
Yeah,
ones.
one of those, and that basically killed whatever interest he had in working there. He was pretty disillusioned with that experience. He came there after having made his first short, which is a short animated film called The Old Lady and the Pigeons, which he was nominated for an Academy Award for. But yeah, I really like the fact that he doesn't really pull punches. Also with his, I mean, the portraits of both French people and Americans as well are also extremely caricatured, like with the Statue of Liberty in in Belleville is an extremely obese person who holds up a hamburger rather than the Torch of Liberty. And there are obese people everywhere in Belleville.
Yeah, and it's all that clear iconography to show and relate to the conception of America as mostly overweight is really, really well done. And it doesn't happen until, a little bit into when they actually get out of the country, which is more French kind of based in its style and aesthetic. Then we move on to Belleville, and it is like a mini America in parts, like a mini French America. Very, very odd.
It's sort of a mix between New York and Montreal.
Yeah. Something you mentioned at the very start of this was we're not doing a Christmas movie. Kind of feel like we are.
It is
because
the morality film, kind of, yeah.
Yeah, the morality throughout this film is very Christmassy. It's the way families love and families and helping one another, and people who have, as you said, fallen off the normal standard that people enjoy living at. They've fallen into the sisters, being poor, living in that kind of poverty. They've fallen into disregard for a lot of people, and having your family and friends there to support you and bring you out and help each other in whatever you need to help each other in. So I think it's got a beautiful story, and I'll let you start and talk about the ending, because it's a bit bittersweet, I guess, but it's a really nice ending, and the cyclical nature of the film is a beautiful way to finish the arc of the narrative.
Yeah, I mean, the film ends with sort of this climactic, sort of standard Hollywood car chase. Which is really funny, where all the mafia guys are chasing them, and all the mafia guys are basically driving the only cars in the film are Citroëns, and there's sort of a running joke in the film that they can't really turn properly, which sort of plays out in in the.
It's a bit like the animated version of the Blues Brothers car chase at the end or something. It's that absurd and completely insane.
Yeah, but then after the car chase, it basically cuts to Champion sitting much older, watching the Triplets of Belleville on his television, the way he watched the prologue or the opening sequence with on the television with Madame Sousa. And then you hear Madame Sousa's voice again. Is that the movie? Is it finished? And he finally turns to where she used to sit next to him, but she's no longer there. And he says, "Yes, mother, it's finished." And that's the end of the film, where there's this acknowledgement that she's gone, but she's still there. She's still with him,
Yeah. And he's not like he's become her, but the narrative has forced him into the same position she was in at the very start. And that, I love the way cyclical narratives work, or at least the way a start and an end to a film can be connected.
Yeah, because there's that callback to that initial line, and those are really the only. There are a couple of there's one other spoken dialogue, like "no hamburgers, no money," when Madame Suzanne goes to a diner and tries to get a hamburger. And
it was odd because I was watching it on YouTube, and the obviously most of it is silent, no dialogue. But when the dialogue did appear, Google's subtitles just couldn't figure out what was properly being said, so it was all over the shop for me. Like sometimes it sounded kind of right, sometimes I like that can't. That's some exceptionally bad grammar and word choice there. There's no way that's right. So it was a bit odd to watch some of those bits. Do you know what it made me feel like afterwards? It's gonna maybe sound a bit odd, but Cinema Paradiso. That same kind of feeling afterwards,
right.
Quite heartwarming and a really interesting look at a particular slice of reality through these caricatures.
Yeah, it's a film that stays with you after you've watched it, I think.
Yeah.
I think also we were talking about the caricatures and character designs, and one I think bears mention is the waiter in the restaurant where the sisters and Madame Tussauds have their concert. Where he's such a thin sort of pencil line, but he constantly like bends over backwards.
Yeah.
In order to sort of
and leans like that.
Yeah, which is a play on the phrase to bend over backwards for someone in order to serve them. Due to the way he dotes on the mafia boss who sits in the restaurant, who's also, by the way, a great character. Like the way his cigarette tube with the cigarette constantly like twitches and his massive French nose. Also sort of a running motif in the film, like Champion's nose as well. Enormous, like eagle beak.
Well, there's that shot, or that little mini scene when Champion's been captured, and the two gangster chiefs are at the top, looking down over where they are, and we get that shot straight up looking at Champion, just nose up like that, and it just looks literally like a racehorse.
Yeah, yeah, but like summing it up, I really adore this film. I can't recommend it enough. A lot of people sort of find it weird and off-putting because, and I can understand why, because it's so different. It's so unlike anything else. It's very surrealist in its expression. It's very French, I would say.
Yeah, yeah, it is very, very French, but with, as you said, splatterings of American culture
Yeah.
and American parody everywhere.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
really liked it. I've never seen it before. I have seen The Illusionist, which is his later film. I
Yeah,
think that's the only
about
film I've ever seen of
and
his.
there are numerous. I mean, The Illusionist is sort of an adaptation of a script by Jacques Tati, a French actor and director, comedian, whom Shumei is a great admirer of, and you can see Tati influences throughout this film as well. And there's sort of a poster, or yeah, movie poster picture in the apartment of the triplets of one of Tati's films
Oh,
as
okay.
well, that I noticed. But yeah, I mean, Tati's influence is sort of felt throughout as well.
Well, I would just say, people want something different that's really heartwarming, that does fit the holiday season, which isn't your standard average animated film that fits in the boxes of what a DreamWorks or a Disney would do. Watch this film. The characterization is beautiful. Um, Sometimes silence is good, and sometimes you don't need dialogue. And if you can have enough physical tells and physical emotion through the performances, especially beautifully done in animation, I think this is one that kids will like, your family will like, and it's one that, as you said, will stick with you for a while. Definitely.
I think the fact that it is sort of so dependent on the visual expression is worth elaborating on, because it's something Shumei sort of has touched on, that he doesn't really consider. He doesn't enjoy a lot of animation, modern animation, because it's too reliant on spoken dialogue. Where
Yeah.
if you want to make an animated film, it has to be, because it has to be an animated film. A lot of sort of modern like Pixar films and like The Incredibles, that could just as easily have been a live action film. As much as I
Yeah.
enjoy that film, really.
Well, motion capture, physical performance in that sense. You've also then got famous actors who are performing these characters, and often those characters will be designed around
Yeah,
those performances or those celebrities rather than the characters being designed the way they should, then the voice
by
fitting
the
the character.
animator and given life by
Exactly.
the animator. Yeah,
Yeah, I just love the traditional work and the combination of modern. I mean, this is a great way for students as well, if you're a student of animation, to understand how you can combine really complex 2D animation with very effective 3D rendered models that fit consistently in the same look of the world. That's really, really difficult to do.
I think there's a good reason why, if you poll animators, a lot of them will actually say this is the best animated film ever made. At least from what I've heard and what I've read, that this is the film they typically go to as sort of peak achievement for animation.
Well, it's up there with Studio Ghibli. I mean, very different
Yeah,
styles, obviously, but Studio Ghibli is another very, very unique animation studio
yeah,
that produces incredibly complex and heartwarming and diverse films. And this would be, that kind of style. It's very different, but they do similar things. They attempt to do similar things. Very
yeah,
different from the Western notion of what Hollywood sees as animation for that
yeah,
hugely broad audience they try and appeal to.
yeah. It's worth mentioning that I think that the Triplets of Belleville, as I mentioned, was nominated for an Academy Award, but it lost to Finding Nemo, which is.
Which doesn't surprise me. I mean,
It's a great film. I love Finding Nemo, but in terms of like an artistic expression achievement, I sort of gravitate more
oh no, no, I do. I mean,
towards
I
Triplets.
love Finding Nemo, but it is what it is. It's a very simple morality tale.
Yeah,
No, it's a very simple arc of a hero's journey we've seen 1,000 times, whereas this is not that. This offers something completely unique and different, even in a narrative sense.
yeah.
Forgo the animation for a minute. Just in a narrative sense, it's completely batshit mad.
And
You
probably,
know?
I think, maybe one of the best female protagonists ever in a movie, with Madame
Madame Sousa
Tussauds.
is
Yeah,
great. Yeah, she really, really is.
Like nothing will stand in her way.
No, the ultimate mother. I know
Yeah.
she's not. She's grandmother, but the
Well,
ultimate
she is
mother.
based, but she does become the boy's mother. I
Yeah.
mean, she is his grandmother, but she
And the
does become his
whistling.
mother.
Oh,
Yeah.
man, when they're actually doing the race, we'll wrap this up soon. But when they're doing the actual race,
Yeah.
and she's in that kind of van following along with that the
Yeah,
driver
with
who
the
looks a bit
driver,
like
yeah.
Mickey Mouse. The whistling. He basically they've been sabotaged. The truck breaks down, and he's down on his hands and knees trying to fix this thing, and she's just stood behind him going over and over again.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Madame Souza is a cool character, really hard working, and like the mother that will go to the end of the earth for you and work harder than you are while you're doing it.
Yeah. So yeah, if you are able to rent it, buy it, watch it.
It's on YouTube for free. Like I said, it's only got a few dialogue issues in terms of subtitling. Apart from that, it's a more than serviceable copy.
Yeah. I think that's about it. Do you have any plans for next week's film? Or
I do indeed. And as we know, we like to be a bit mad on this podcast and be not only obscure, but sometimes just a little bit. So it's New Year, and hopefully we'll shoot the next one just before New Year. Catherine Bigelow's Strange Days, 1995. You ever seen that?
nope, can't say that I have.
Okay. It takes place just before then on New Year, which is one of the reasons I've chosen it. I also love Catherine Bigelow. She's one of the strongest, most amazing female directors of
Yeah,
that
Hurt
generation. Exactly, Hurt Locker. And Strange Days is a very weird, futuristic noir thriller. Just a bit of cyberpunk thrown in, because you know I love that stuff. But yeah, that's what we'll cover next week, guys.
That sounds great. Happy holidays, guys. And,
Yeah, have a
thanks for
great
watching and
Christmas.
listening.